Hey guys, it's your girl Shay, the woman in the mirror, and the last time before this morning we talked and I said that I would be posting a video on Michael Jackson and who was the man in the mirror. So let's take a look at that, shall we? Michael Jackson was born August the 29th of 1958 in Gary, Indiana, to Joseph Walter Jackson and Catherine Screws Jackson. He lived at 2300 Jackson Street, a 670 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath home shared with him and his 9 siblings, 2 to follow after Michael, since Michael was the 7th born. To his parents, like I said, in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home with a kitchen and a living room. That meant that the main bedroom, the master bedroom, belonged to Joseph and Catherine. The second bedroom belonged to the 6 boys. They slept on bunk beds that were 3-tier. The bottom bunk was reserved for the 2 elder boys on either side of the room. In the middle bunk slept 3 boys. On the left side of the room, you had Michael, Marlon, and Randy in the middle bunk. And I believe you had Jermaine and Tito on the other bunk there. So, yeah, it can get pretty crazy, for that over there in the Jackson household. And you also have to understand Gary, Indiana at the time. Gary, Indiana was a rough suburb of Chicago. And you have to also understand the backdrop of which this is taking place. This is taking place during the Civil Rights Movement, a time when it was hard for African Americans at the time. So that was also part of the period known as one of the Great Migrations. There was a lot of outrage and rioting because of what was going on in the community, because of what was going on in the Deep South. People were, as we say today, becoming woke. Woke to the fact that people weren't treated the same. I mean, come on. At this time, Michael and his brothers, as the Jackson 5, are touring as they called it back then, on the Chitlin circuit, because music was even segregated. Up until Motown, you had racially segregated music. Whites listened to Elvis Presley. Black people listened to people like Jackie Wilson. And here's the crazy thing about it. The white rock and roll stars were stealing from the African stars. So you have to understand that in this time where he grew up, at the time, Gary also was very dangerous, had a lot of gangs, a lot of drugs going on. And not only that, it had the highest murder per capita in the United States at the time. So that means they had the highest rate of murder and homicide in the United States. So Joseph wanted to keep his boys out of trouble. So back in those days, corporal punishment was legal. As a matter of fact, it was a common practice. And you couldn't just, even where they lived, you couldn't just be, good. You had to be better. And so they whipped you because they believed that in order to make you better, you're going to learn. And you're going to learn through fear. And so Michael's dad, once, they were practicing, because they lived a strange life even for people back then, because they were the only Jehovah's Witness on the street. They didn't have Christmas lights up. They didn't celebrate the holidays. They just kind of stayed to themselves because they were the quirky weirdos in the corner there, back then. And so they didn't have many friends. All they really had was each other, because Joseph kept them on a tight leash. And when Joseph didn't keep them on a tight leash, sometimes, Catherine, she would, let them go outside and play. And as soon as they saw Joseph's car coming up the driveway, they'd scat and pretend that they'd been practicing for hours. So then if you didn't get it right, because Joseph had a vision. Joseph had a vision. He was going to take his children out of the slums and they were going to be somebody. They were not going to be just on the street corner doing drugs because he wanted more for his kids than that. Joseph was a dreamer. Joseph had dreams himself of becoming a professional boxer. But as soon as Katie told him she was pregnant, he gave up his aspirations and he worked a job at a steel mill, working overtime most of the time, not bringing home at the most about $65 a week to $75 on a good week. And when the work ran out there, he picked potatoes. The man worked 2 and 3 jobs. He worked as a butcher. He did everything he could to put food on the table for those kids. And according to Tito Jackson in the latest Janet docu-series on Lifetime, by the way, you guys should really check it out. It's really great. He said that we never knew we were poor. We seen, poor people that were homeless. They didn't have a bite to eat. And said, what we didn't realize was we were just a few plates from that ourselves. But Joseph didn't want us seeing the lure of drugs and, getting out into the trouble and doing it that way. He wanted us to do it the right way. And he figured by keeping us, rehearsing and out the streets and keeping us busy, we wouldn't have time for that. And what a genius it was. Because what he did hone was one day he came home and found that his guitar string was broken. And he says, well, who broke my guitar string? And Katie says, because that's what they called her. They called her Katie. They didn't call her Catherine, or they called her Kate. Says, well, before you get on to Tito, I want you to know that he plays guitar better than you. And if you know Joe Jackson and his wrath, you would know that that was a pretty bold statement to make, especially when he had a history of hitting people and beating people. He might not have hit her because he made the mistake of hitting her one time. And that was the last time he ever hit her because she threw, I believe it was a toaster or a microwave and hit him with it. And she said, don't you ever hit me again or I'll beat you so bad your head will be spinning. So he never beat her again. He took that and went on to the children. And did that with it. But again, back in those days, it was called a whipping. It wasn't considered a beating people. So then she says, you need to hear him play. He play better than you. So he's sitting there, he's crying, playing the thing. And he goes, he's really trying to play that thing. And she goes, yeah. The other one's been harmonizing. I think we've really got something here, And so he listens to him, and that's when he decides he's going to form this group together. And one of the things that really frustrated Catherine as a wife is that he put so much time and energy into the boys that he wouldn't add on to the house. Like, they would go out in the strip clubs, and you got to realize they went to places that weren't exactly suited for children. They went on the roughest circuit. Sometimes it was hard, to get a hotel because you were the wrong color, you were black. Couldn't do that back then. So that was winning contests and winning contests. And he was going to have them perfected because you couldn't just do it just because you were good. Because you got to understand, it was kids all out in the street corners that were good at what they did and could have got a record deal. If you wanted to really get out of obscurity and really be the best at something and really make it, you had to be the best. You couldn't just be halfway or almost there. That's why Joseph did what he did. But Michael, being the youngest, starting out at 5 years old, he didn't have a normal childhood. But really, none of them really did because, come on, if you look at the early days, that wasn't normal. Not even by today's standards, okay? So it's just like, he's 5 years old. He's seeing all of this stuff. He's sensitive, and I'm not really sure if the dad got it or if he got it, he gave up his fatherhood basically to get his children into a safe environment for love for them. And it's hard for us as fans to understand that. But Michael even described his dad. He's like, he was a hard man, but the man was a genius. And he got his astute business sense. He was a shark. Michael was a shark when it came to business. And so I think that to understand the man in the mirror, we had to understand the childhood. And all Michael really wanted was a hug from his dad. He talks about this memory of a time where Joseph treated the family to treats, and the first person he picked up, hugged and kissed was Michael. And he had this bag of donuts, and he gave him the donuts first. And when he hugged and kissed them and embraced them, that was a big thing. But if you look at pictures, and I'll post those later in a short, of Michael during the trial or any hard thing that Michael was going through in his life, you'll see even publicly, Joseph was holding his hand, and he didn't have to do that, but he was holding his hand to let Mike know that he was there for him. So if you go through and you being bullied and called big nose, because that's just what we do in the South, okay? It's just some families do. I was made for the color of my skin. I grew up in an all white, household, and I was made to feel bad about who I was and just felt out of place. Called big nose. I was even referred to Michael Jackson as a derogatory statement. Although today I look at that and I'm proud. I'm proud to have been, referred to by that name, even if it was derogatory, because Michael was a musical genius. Michael was my escape as a kid, having CP. His music got me through hard days. I used to sing, and I used to sing well. And I used to study him because he was the master. And okay, and if you want to do something, you want to do something great, you got to study the master, okay? So that's what I did. And followed in Mike's footsteps with that. So when you're go through that and you're made fun of and you have all of these things and then you're in a fishbowl. I'm not a celebrity, but I'm in a fishbowl because I'm a wife, I'm a mom. Every move I make is, utterly scrutinized to the utmost. So I understand that fishbowl, you don't really know what somebody's up to. You got to constantly be watching your back. You don't know if somebody likes you for you or whatever, or they may think you're weird. Or so that shapes the adults you become today. Now, I don't have the luxury that Michael had once he had, come to the Thriller success. You come into that, you got all of these billions of dollars, you create whatever world you want. You got all the yes men at your feet, and you remove your grounding from underneath you, the family that shaped you. And I think that ultimately it was those people that were around Mike that were responsible for his death. Because if they would have allowed his family around him, Mike's family would have come in and they would have been able to help him in a way that the people in the industry couldn't. But they were just like, well, you're Michael Jackson, you're the king of pop. Yes, that's true. But he needed somebody to care about him, like really care about his well-being, not just the money you could get out of it by getting him on drugs. And I know allegedly that's a controversial statement, but come on. I mean, Arnold Klont, the dermatologist, you could watch the TMZ videos, and later on today I will put the links down in the description box below where you can find the information I'm talking about. They were filming him. He would go in one way, normal, and come out and he barely even know what was going on. He's higher than a kite. I mean, he even has a song called Demerol. Come on. My God, he's taking Demerol. Demerol. My God, he's taking Demerol. I mean, it's a song called Morphine, but those are some of the words in which you find. So I think to better understand that, he didn't have a normal childhood. He didn't, get to do what other people do. Can you blame him for being a little eccentric? I think not. I think that too much harsh judgment is being placed on a man who had basically the world at his feet. Then they tried to destroy him. They built him up to destroy him. Why? Because a black man was making it in America. And how dare a black man make it? If you look even at the Constitution, we the people, that we the people believe that all men are created equal. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, if you also look in that statement, you will find that the Negro man is only considered 3/4 of a person and a barbarian. So therefore, he is considered property. Now, I firmly believe that we were created in the image of God. So we're all equal in that. It doesn't matter what color you are. Like, you should be loved and accepted for just the way he made you. Now, that being said, that wasn't right. But that was what was going on at the time when Michael, was making it big in the Motown. They were the first ones, to break that barrier. The first really big boy band was a boy band of color, and they were able to cross that racial divide. They brought young and old, black and white together. Because back in those days, there wasn't yellow. There wasn't all this. It was literally in black and white. And I think that, he just was a very misunderstood man. And he truly was a real Peter Pan because he was longing for that childhood that he didn't get to have. It was, for him, it was about wonderment and youth. And I think he was right when he says you can't lose that, because once you lose that, you stop being creative. You stop being able to be certain types of things. And I think he was just a genius. And if we were to